Nobody in Hollywood understood what they were looking at. A former Mr. Universe hoisting the most photographed woman in America over his head at the beach in 1956. That was front-page material everywhere. What the cameras didn't capture was the other side. Mickey Hargitay was the one person in Jane Mansfield's life who genuinely seemed to love the woman, not the image. 4 marriages, mountains of tragedy to come. But right here, in this shot, that's pure joy. And you can't fake that. The next one is nothing like this. The helicopters started circling at dawn. A dozen press choppers hovering over the Malibu cliffs, and he went up on the roof of the house with a shotgun and fired into the air to drive them off. That is how this marriage started. And honestly, everything that came after, every story, every headline, every court date, was already written in that first moment. 2 people at the absolute peak of their fame, trying to have something private. Hollywood didn't let them. I'm not sure either of them would have wanted it any other way. The British press had a full-blown meltdown. A French actress stepping off a plane in a miniskirt in 1952, years before anyone was calling them miniskirts, and every photographer at Heathrow was suddenly on the tarmac. What gets me is she wasn't trying to make a statement. That was just Tuesday for her. The English papers treated it like a national incident, which, in a way, it was. Saint-Tropez in the late 60s was its own planet. 2 people who understood exactly what the world thought of them, lying on the deck of a boat with the Mediterranean behind them, laughing at something we'll never know. The story goes they made 1 film together that same year and barely spoke on set, despite what you see here. Some chemistry doesn't need conversation. Marilyn Monroe, 1962. The last photographs taken of her were the most alive she'd looked in years. 3 months after this session, she was gone. What most people forget about Streetcar is how close the censors came to gutting the whole thing before it even opened. They went through it scene by scene. What survived still hit audiences like a truck, and a lot of the credit belongs to Kim Hunter, who is always the most underrated performance in that film, in my opinion. Brando got all the attention. She held the entire thing together. Nobody wanted her for this role. That's the part the studio publicity machine spent years smoothing over. The producers had someone else in mind, a bigger name, a more established box office draw. Audrey Hepburn was considered too delicate, too European, too something. The makeup test was basically a formality. And then whoever was in that room saw what the camera saw, and the conversation was over. What I find remarkable is the expression in this shot. She looks like she already knows exactly what she's doing. She always did. The directors of West Side Story, and there were effectively 2 of them, which was already a problem, disagreed about almost everything, including her. She wasn't a trained dancer, and they both knew it. What ended up on screen came from weeks of rehearsals that, by most accounts, were grueling and sometimes humiliating. That expression right there is not someone warming up. That's someone proving something. And she did. 2 years before the wedding on the Malibu cliff, she was sitting on a bench in the East Village between 2 men who could have been her grandfathers, wearing torn jeans and a chain belt, completely unknown. Richard Corman photographed her all over downtown Manhattan that year. The gap between this shot and where she was 12 months later is one of the most extreme before and afters in the whole decade. You would never see it coming. Off-screen Gary Cooper is almost never talked about, and I think that's a real shame. He had a reputation in Hollywood for being difficult, quiet, closed off, hard to read. And then you find a photograph like this: a cowboy hat, a mountain town, a little girl on his lap who clearly has no idea her father is one of the most famous men in America. That's all it is. Just a man with his kid on a cold day in Idaho. Sometimes that's the whole story. Summer stock was supposed to be a disaster. Garland had been on suspension from MGM. There were weeks of missed shoot days. The studio was losing patience. And then she showed up one afternoon and filmed the Get Happy sequence, essentially one take. And it became one of the most watched musical moments of that entire era. The rest of the film was already in the can. She walked in, did that, and walked out. Some people just have it like that. The tension between these two on set was something the crew talked about for years after. Not animosity, something more complicated than that. Two people from completely different schools of acting, working in a different language, on a film about the war that was still raw for both Italy and France. What came out was that performance, and she won the Oscar for it. First time a non-English language performance ever took the prize. The film is almost never discussed anymore. But Louis Malle made it as a direct response to what the press was doing to her, filming her own suffocation by celebrity while she was living it. She barely spoke about it afterward. Dean Martin almost didn't make it through production. Not because of the role, because nobody on that set could figure out if he was acting or just being himself. Howard Hawks said he'd give Dino a direction and get a shrug and a cigarette back. What ended up on screen became his best dramatic work. Pure accident, by most accounts. Where do you land on that? Accident or instinct? By 1957, she'd already been married 3 times, including to Sinatra, who reportedly never fully got over it. She once said she'd rather laugh than cry. Looking at this shot, I believe her. A political fundraiser in Beverly Hills is not where you'd expect to find these two. Young Citizens for Johnson, the presidential campaign. McQueen doing anything organized is hard to picture, but there they are. What I find interesting is that both of them were, at that exact moment, right on the edge of their careers exploding wide open. Neither one looks like they know it yet. The poster sold 12 million copies. 12 million. And that is not a misprint. She spent the rest of her career trying to get people to take her seriously as a dramatic actress. She eventually succeeded. Most people missed it. He once said the only time he felt completely free was behind a wheel or on the water. This looks about right. Nobody around, nobody watching. Just him and the engine. Before Roman Holiday, before any of it, she was a ballet dancer trying to become an actress. Secret People was a small British picture. Nobody expected anything from it. The director gave her scenes requiring real dance training, figuring she'd fake her way through. She didn't have to fake it because she'd trained seriously since childhood, surviving the war on near-starvation rations in Holland. That fact alone changes how you watch her move. Venice, 1953. He's about to take on one of the most demanding roles in classical literature. He looks like he's waiting for a bus. That stillness before a big performance is its own kind of preparation. 20 down, 30 to go. Next section. Some of the stories you think you know, you don't. At the absolute height of Queen's commercial run, Live Aid was the same year as this photograph. He went home to his house in Kensington and fed his cats. He had somewhere between 6 and 10 cats over his lifetime, depending on who you ask. And by most accounts, they were the one constant in a life that didn't have many. He dedicated albums to them. He called them From the Road. The people who knew him best say this is the truest photograph of him that exists. Not the stage, not the crowd. This. The dynamic on that set was never exactly warm. Scorsese had De Niro, an established collaborator, known quantity. Liotta was coming in hot, high stakes, needing to hold his own against one of the most intimidating screen presences in the business. What you see in this diner shot is two men in character who were also, in some way, not entirely not themselves. That's what made it work. Spielberg almost cast someone else. The studio wanted a more recognizable American name for Amon Guth, someone whose casting would carry weight before a word was spoken. Fiennes was relatively unknown here. The argument against him was real. What ended up on screen was one of the most unsettling performances in American cinema, not because of what he does, but because of what he withholds. The moments where he almost seems human are the ones that stay with you long after. That was all him. No direction gives you that. The famous story from this production is probably apocryphal, but I'll tell it anyway. Hoffman stayed awake for days to prepare for a scene, came to set looking wrecked, and Olivier looked at him and said, "My dear boy, have you tried acting?" Whether that's real or not, what is documented is that these two men operated from completely opposite theories of performance and barely tolerated each other. What came out of that friction on screen is genuinely difficult to watch. Honestly, I think that was the whole point. Based on Camus, directed by Visconti, shot in Algeria, two Europeans playing at existentialism on a beach. There's something quietly ridiculous about it that somehow works completely. He'd spent 20 years playing men who controlled rooms through menace, and then this film asked him to play a man losing everything, who finds one afternoon of grace in a hotel ballroom tango. The tango scene wasn't supposed to be the center of the picture. It became the center of the picture. Pacino said he rehearsed it for weeks. On screen, it does not look rehearsed at all. That is the entire point. River Phoenix. 23 years old when this came out. Whatever was being built in that career, and it was something extraordinary, we only got half of it. Standing on a beach in a white linen shirt with a cigarette, looking like she owns the entire coastline. The film itself was forgotten almost immediately. This photograph was not. This is not a publicity shoot. Leo Fuchs photographed her here while she was filming The Nun's Story on location, one of the most physically demanding productions she ever did. But what gets me about this image is what it anticipates. 15 years later, she would essentially walk away from acting to work for UNICEF, spending the last decade of her life in some of the hardest places on Earth. This shot in the jungle looks less like a film still and more like a rehearsal for what came next. The realest thing she ever did. Every agency, every client, every photographer told her to fix the gap in her front teeth. She refused. And in doing that, in simply refusing to change the one thing that made her face unusual, she became one of the most booked models in the country. I've always thought that's a better career lesson than anything you'd hear at business school. Sometimes the flaw is the whole point. 30 down. Stay with me. Next 10 take a different turn. They met on a film set in 1983 and have never married. 40 plus years. Every few years, someone asks one of them why not, and they give some version of the same answer. They chose each other every morning, and the paperwork would change something they didn't want changed. Whether you agree with that philosophy or not, in Hollywood for 40 years, it held. Do you remember seeing them together back then? The studio had very little faith in this film. Shot mostly in Mexico, under difficult conditions, tight budget, and Douglas was producing it himself after the project had been passed around for years. What nobody anticipated was the on-screen chemistry, and the fact that Turner and Douglas didn't particularly get along off-camera made it, if anything, sharper on camera. That kind of tension either dies on screen or it crackles. This one crackled. The story goes they met at a film festival. He introduced himself, and within about 30 seconds told her he wanted to be the father of her children. She thought he was joking. He was not. 3 years before Speed, 13 years before The Matrix, and here he is in a film about teenagers who cover up a murder and feel essentially nothing about it. River's Edge is probably the darkest thing he ever did, and almost nobody saw it when it came out. It's the performance that made directors start paying serious attention. That stillness was not something you learn. That was just him. The cruel irony of Less Than Zero is that Downey was playing a character destroyed by addiction, while, by most accounts, living something uncomfortably close to that reality himself. The film came and went without much impact at the time. Years later, after everything he went through and came back from, it became one of those pictures people look at completely differently. The performance didn't need reinterpretation. It was already real. Sinatra asked to do the episode himself, called the producer directly, said he was a fan of the show and wanted in. Nobody said no to Frank Sinatra. Nobody. 5 years after American Gigolo made him famous, he was still navigating New York like someone the city hadn't entirely decided to accept yet. It hadn't, quite, but close. The action star thing, the machine guns, the bare feet, the one-liners. That's one side of who he was. The other side is in this photograph. 3 little girls, all tongues out, completely at ease with their dad, who is also sticking his tongue out and wearing a baseball cap that says Champions. This is the backstage version of that man, which most people never got to see. I think about this photograph when I think about what his family has been going through these past few years. This is the man they knew. 2 years before Ace Ventura, still mostly known from sketch comedy. Nobody had any idea what was coming. But look at that little girl's face. She knew her dad was funny. Tamlyn Tomita had never made a film before Karate Kid Part 2. Her audition was the first time she'd ever been in front of a professional camera. What came through was completely natural. No training, no tricks, just presence. The fact that they've stayed in touch all these years says something real about what that shoot meant. Some sets just have that. Same year as Beetlejuice, before Heathers, before Edward Scissorhands. She was 16 or 17 in this shot, already working, but still completely unknown to the general public. There's something in that expression, Not quite a smile, not quite suspicion. That shows up in almost every role she played for the next decade. Some faces carry their own weather. She had that from the very beginning. He was filming Back to the Future Part 2 on the same days he was shooting this picture, simultaneously. Different sets, different costumes, different call times. He said later he barely slept for a year. 2 people at a premiere for someone else's film. Fox was there as a guest, not a cast member. And this photograph became one of the most passed around images of the whole decade. What strikes me is how young they both look. Not young for Hollywood, just young. Like actual 20-something people at a movie opening. Which is, of course, exactly what they were. The Brat Pack label stuck because one journalist wrote one magazine profile. 1. The actors resented it for years. Lowe said it cost him serious roles. Estevez said it reduced them all to a marketing category. He wasn't wrong. Here's what most people either forgot or never knew. The original ending of Pretty in Pink had Ringwald's character end up with Ducky. John Hughes shot it. Test audiences hated it. The ending was reshot. And if you watch the film knowing that, the whole thing plays differently. You can feel the version that existed before the studio got cold feet. Personally, I think the first ending was right. Fight me in the comments. One of the most photographed faces of the late 80s, and almost nobody knew her name yet. That particular phase of a career, recognized by cameras unknown to audiences, lasts about 18 months. Then it's over. The film held #1 for weeks and made more money than anyone projected. What it's mostly remembered for now is the urban legend, a ghost visible behind a curtain in one scene. The ghost was a cardboard standee of Ted Danson's character from an earlier scene. But the rumor spread through every schoolyard in America faster than any marketing campaign could have managed. Some myths are better than the truth. 2 siblings who started in the same Chicago theater scene went to Hollywood the same year and kept working together for decades. That's not a coincidence. That's a foundation. Class was supposed to be a straightforward coming-of-age comedy. What it accidentally became was a launching pad. McCarthy and Lowe both got their first serious attention here, and Bissell, who was already an established name, gave the whole thing credibility it probably didn't earn on paper. The story goes she took the role because she liked the director. Sometimes that's the only reason you need. Madison Square Garden, 1994. He's sitting in the stands at a Knicks game reading the New York Daily News. Everyone around him is watching the court. He's reading the paper. And nobody in that arena, and nobody looking at this photograph, knows that in 5 years, he'll be gone. A plane he was piloting, lost over the water off Martha's Vineyard on a summer night in 1999. There's something about this particular shot I've never been able to fully shake. A man in a crowd, completely alone with his thoughts on an ordinary Tuesday. Was there someone you lost too soon who looked something like that?